In progress. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the David and the Bear podcast. I don't know. I don't even know what episode we're on, but y'all can figure that out. I'm back with another very special guest of mine. Um, her name is Haley. She is the operations with an S support manager. She helps out a whole lot more than a lot of people think in at the amp. So yeah, she's one of the managers at the Orion. She's she does everything from like office things to like making sure all the managers are good to like making sure all the front of house people are good, the back of house people are good. Haley is almost like the Rachel for everybody. Um, she is married to her lovely husband Drew, which we hope to get him on the podcast one of these days. And then yeah, no kids yet, right?
No, no kids yet, just a dog.
Oh, she's a dog mom too, guys. Dog mom. And then without further ado, Haley.
Awesome. Thank you, Devon. Happy to be joining you. So thank you so much.
So I guess the real question is, where do you want to start? Do you want to start on like a super high, or like you want to start low or somewhere in between?
I think you let me know. I'm just along for the ride. So you
All
tell me
all right.
what we're doing, and
Well, let's
I'm
go
here
then.
for it.
Let's go.
Cool.
What's one of your biggest challenges in life?
I It might be kind of a weird answer, I guess, but it took me a while to think through this question when you sent it. I think I am somebody who has always struggled with like independence.
Mm,
And I know that feels like kind of weird to say that because like I just turned 27. So, not a lot of adults would be like, oh, I'm like not really an independent person. But I think by nature, like I am a very extroverted, super talkative,
hmm
like person. And instead of being somebody who would say they like recharge or get relief from like being alone, I think I get that exact same feeling and relief from being around people a lot.
that's
And
fair.
being alone, like it kind of is draining in a way to me as a person and as an extrovert, I guess. Um, so yeah, I grew up in an incredibly loving environment and have always leaned on like verbal processing to work through my thoughts. And I think all of that can be like a little bit detrimental to becoming an independent like adult.
hmm
So I think that's something I've always struggled with or found challenging, like in my 20s for sure, is just being somebody who's like self-sufficient and like can do it on my own or like independent and stuff. So I've had to kind of like learn that. So I
hmm
would say that's been kind of challenging as I've kind of come into being like in my 20s and stuff. Is just independence in general, and that might not be a very popular answer, but I think that's my answer, truthfully.
Where do you I guess do you feel like you get not really help, but like kind of a push to be more independent with the job that you're in, or like just the things that you do daily?
Yeah, definitely. So like before I stepped into this role with TVG or at the Orion, I was our office manager. And there are other office managers at other offices that we have for sure. But starting with the company doing that job, it felt, I always joke that it was like a Lone Ranger situation because
hmm
I didn't have like, I wasn't a member of like a team or a department. I kind of had to be self sufficient and independent in like the work setting because there was nobody else to, um, kind of like soundboard talk to or do things and get support in that way. I kind of would have to reach out to other folks in other departments and pick their brains about things. So it was really interesting coming from somewhere else work wise that I worked at previously that I was the head over a department. There was a
hmm
lot of that like support and like leaning on one another to being an office manager and the only one in Huntsville. And then that turning into the job I'm in now as of this year, which is very independent and it's still kind of the same situation, but there's not another operations support manager at the company I work for. So it's kind of a learning game, growing that role into what is needed in Huntsville. But in terms of like the independence piece, I definitely have learned in my professional life, I would say, and my personal life over the last like year or so, how to be comfortable with being, on my own and being just an independent person in general. So yeah, that's something I think I've always found challenging, and it was challenging work wise too. I didn't really anticipate that when I took the job of office manager initially. That's not something you think about, but yeah, I love people. So just learning how to love spending time with myself as much has
Hmm.
been a little bit challenging. But yeah.
So I guess you kind of tapped into the next question is what are you
Mhm.
passionate about?
Oh yeah, that answer for me was really easy. People
Hmm.
is definitely my
And then
answer. I would say.
why do you feel like you're so passionate about people and just people in general and being around them?
Yeah, definitely. I think of myself like, um, especially like as a high schooler, right? Like I'm 27 now, so I think about myself back in high school, like a decade ago, and everybody's obviously talking about like your career paths
Mm,
and going to college and like what you want to do, what matters to you, what are you passionate about, like all that stuff. And I don't think I've ever had a solid answer when someone has asked me like what career path I wanted to do as a teen. The only time I could really think of an answer, the answer was like I want to do something with people or helping
mm,
people. I want to be heavily involved with helping others, and so it's kind of been like a funny thing that I've always thought through is that people kind of come first in my mind, whether that's like strangers or people that I know personally. And in terms of work, like being operations support manager for our team, like the role didn't, like I said, it didn't exist when we first opened,
mm,
but it became pretty evident over time. And as people started to like learn their roles and settle and like into what they're doing at the Orion, and then also working departmentally, cross departmentally, like people working with other folks. And then we've got really stellar leadership too. It became a little bit evident that there's like never such a thing as too much support.
mm,
And yeah, so that was kind of a truth that showed itself. And then I think I'm personally really passionate about supporting like each individual team member at the Orion as well as departmentally. I really love being a voice when I can be for like each department that's represented. And yeah, with my job, I pretty much do everything that's in my power to help solve issues or like fill in the gaps that people see. But the most powerful thing that I can do for them, I believe, is to genuinely care,
mm.
to listen and be available for them at any time. And I just think we spend so much of our lives like at work and the
That's
music
fair.
industry, yeah, and the music and venue industry both are, it's not a secret that they can be like pretty draining
Mm,
and they require a lot of each person involved. And I love being able to be that support person to where like work doesn't feel like, a standard 9 to 5.
mm.
I live for the weekends. I hate my job. Like that stereotype that everybody's heard and seen like in media and stuff. If I can make work not feel like, oh my God, I hate my job or something for people, that's really what I'm about and what I love to do. So yeah, if I get to touch folks in my like day to day life and try to do my best to help others, I think that that's what matters the most to me.
Mm.
People do. So, and yeah, I love my job. So, yeah, I think it all kind of goes together.
So I guess kind of flipping back to the to one of your challenges, what do you think is your biggest failure in life up to this point?
So, do you want the funny short
Oh, we
one?
want it all. We want it all.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the lighthearted answer. And it it's so funny. Okay. Or it's funny to me, man. Biggest failure. Uh, so I grew up singing a lot and stuff.
Mm,
Specifically like churches and church settings. And I grew up in a really small town, around Huntsville. And one time I was singing at a graduation, and it was actually my husband's graduation because he went to the same school as me, but we didn't like really know each other in high
mm.
school. So that's a long story. We like re-met later in the future, but no, weren't like a high school sweetheart situation there. But so I was singing with a group at actually his graduation. So it was the graduation the year ahead of mine, 2014, I think. And Sarah Palin, of all people, was like coming to be the guest speaker for his thing. And for our small town, like that was an
A
insanely
big deal,
huge
yeah.
name. Like, yeah, truthfully, we could have had like our local weatherman from Huntsville like come to, not to knock Sarah Palin or anything, but we could have had that happen. And I feel like people would have lost their minds and sold out, the area we were doing it
Mm,
to. So just to have someone of that scale was crazy for my town and my school to have her come and do that. So she came and was like the guest speaker. She did a wonderful job. But before she came up to speak, I was a part of the group that was singing, and I had a solo. And the way that this space is set up where we did it, the cameras, like the lyrics were nowhere. And all the time growing up singing, there were lyrics at every church, like in front of me,
A
or I'd have
confidence
them on
board.
my, yeah. Like I am not great with like, I guess lyrical memorization sometimes because I get so nervous. And so yeah, the whole place was packed and the camera like zoomed in on each face as people had solos. So imagine we're in a sports arena, right? So imagine these massive screens all around, like
Oh, very lovely.
360
Very
view.
lovely.
Yeah. My little like 16-year-old face, probably, I think I was 16, gets zoomed in on. And at the moment I'm supposed to have the solo, I just forget the words and I don't even fake it. I just fully freeze, clam up, and they have to like cut the shot to the big group again because and it's quiet. It's silent because I'm
Mhm.
not singing. So yeah, that was I would say that it was a little bit of a failure, a little bit of an embarrassing moment for me growing up. It was a very humbling
Mhm.
experience. Um, but yeah, I try not to think too deeply into that. But it is a crazy thing that happened, and I mean, this was like God and everybody came to see Sarah Palin at this place. Like my whole tiny town fit in that room, you know. So it was. I mean, it was fun. It's something that I think back on, and I'm like, well, if I made it through that, I can make it through whatever.
She
But
said
yeah,
God and
so that's
everybody.
my yeah, God and Sarah Palin and everybody's moms and dads and grandparents and peepaws and all everybody was in that room for the graduation, and I got nervous, I guess, and froze. But it's okay. That happens. Nobody remembers
Oh,
it but me.
100%.
Is the thing. Yeah. So it's crazy how that went down. So that's my fun answer. My more realistic kind of was a little bit harder to think through answer in terms of what I think is a bigger, failure. On a more serious note, I think my biggest failure would be, and like I said earlier, like I'm 27 now.
Mhm.
I think my biggest failure would be thinking less of myself or
Mm.
thinking little of myself throughout my early 20s. And yeah, I was pretty insecure in like who I am as a person, and a part of that looked like never being able to make a decision to save my life, whether that was like what I wanted to order at a fast food restaurant or something, or like picking out a wedding dress or something. Like I had a really difficult time because I wasn't confident in myself, me as a person, as a decision maker, as a planner, or whatever it is. I really lacked that for a while, and yeah, I would say not seeking help earlier for some of those like emotional struggles or mental struggles that are my in my mind is a bit of a failure that I didn't reach out and get the help I think I needed until I was like 25. So glad I did, and I eventually did in a much better place now. But yeah, I think that would be my biggest failure is just not reaching out when I knew I kind of needed it back
Mhm.
then. Hmm.
So I guess taking taking a segue into the next question, do you feel like you've truly accepted and embraced who you are at your core?
Yeah, I would say yes. Took me a little bit to get there, but I think, yeah, I think for a year or two now, I've definitely settled into that. So I would say yes.
And, being around the music scene and all that kind of stuff, you're gonna meet people along the way that become friends or acquaintances and all that kind of stuff. People in our lovely management office, becoming
Hmm.
friends. What do you think are the most important qualities of a friend to you? What do you look
Yeah,
for, I guess?
yeah. No, that's a really good question. Um, I think in terms of having a friend or having someone close to you in your life, some of the most important qualities for me that I look for are authenticity, patience, and then I would say an eagerness to see their people succeed. I
Mm.
think those things kind of trump a lot of others in my mind. Um, and I think if someone is acting, on all of those qualities, they're kind of a really stellar person to have around and to have in your corner. So that's what I would say.
And then I guess kind of diving a little bit more deeper into that, you have a friend for life, and and Drew. What did you
Yeah.
see in him that, attracted you to him?
Yeah. So Drew, it's kind of funny. We went on our first date 6 years after kind of a crazy, we had a class together. He asked me to prom and then dumped me right before prom.
Drew, Drew,
Crazy.
Drew. I hope he listens
Oh
to
my
this podcast
gosh.
too. We're gonna talk about it.
It was, dude, it was the gossip, the gossip of the town. It was crazy. I'm just kidding. It was the gossip in my mind that was happening. The little sophomore Haley who couldn't go to prom
Mm.
without having a date. Um, yeah, at the time he had asked me, and we went to a couple baseball games together and had a class together and stuff. And very rightfully so. He did the right thing. He was so kind about it back then. Whenever I say it harshly. I'm like, he dumped me in my driveway. He dropped me off that night and dumped me. But and I had already had a prom dress picked out. That's crazy. I already bought it. But fast forward 6 years and a lot of failed relationships on both of our ends, and um, lots of life later. We he hit me up on Instagram, the love story of modern times, and was like, "Hey, is this book you're reading good?" And I said, "Well, I just started it, but I've heard it's good." And I almost didn't respond because in your mind, later in the future at this point, and I'm like, this dude broke my heart as much as he could have,
What?
from like
It's like what a
18,
weirdo. He's trying to he's
15.
trying to he's trying to
I know.
contact me all these years
I
later.
know. And I was like, bless his heart though, because if he's genuinely interested in wanting to like reconnect, it makes sense to use a book as a, opportunity and a door to walk through to talk to me. But which is funny because he loves to write and
Mm,
we both read so much. Like we have tons of books at our house now. So it's kind of a cute little what the future would look like. It does have to do with books. We love to read.
mm,
So, but yeah, he asked me on a date. And on our first date, we were going to eat sushi together. And I remember having such a good time sitting across from him at the booth. And this is I promise it's all going to wrap around to him as a person. We were sitting there, and I remember finishing my food last, and I was still like we were talking and we were cutting up, and like we'd probably been there for like an hour or so. And the moment I put the last like bite of sushi in my mouth, he stood up to leave, and I remember instantly feeling a little like, oh dang, like he didn't have a good time, like that
mm.
sucks. He's ready to leave. I thought we were having a great time. And he stood up and he looked at me and like he didn't even think about it, but he was like, let's go so someone else who needs the table can have it, is what he was saying.
Hmm.
And then we left and he asked me to go grab a coffee after dinner, and we sat around and talked for way longer. But I just kind of assumed he wasn't into me or something at the time. But the reality is Drew is someone who does think a lot of others, and I think he is somebody who is very like I would say strong in his convictions in a lot of ways. Like he holds himself to some really like high standards realistically in a lot of ways, and it's very encouraging to see someone that is a devoted and like dedicated husband and a
Hmm.
devoted like son and friend and brother, and all of and in the future probably father, hopefully all of these, and dog dad, like assistant general manager where he works,
Mm.
like he's all of these different really cool things that I've gotten to see him grow and kind of learn more, of who he is as a person as we've both gotten older together. But he has always been somebody who thinks of others, and I love that about him. And also he's hilarious and fun to be around, and I could go on and on. Like I love Drew. I think he's the best. But yeah, that's definitely what drew me to him. Ha, Drew, because that's his name. But what drew me to him initially was how he was thinking immediately of people who I don't even think there were people waiting on a table, but his brain just thought, oh, let's go somewhere different so that someone else can sit here. They need it more than us. And that's somebody I want to pitch my wagon to.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, love that guy.
So going from, being, I guess, pretty much laid down easy after prom, to, you know, um, getting embarrassed in front of, Sarah Palin and all that kind of stuff, and then not knowing how to, I guess, pro I wouldn't even say properly be independent, but like, um,
Yeah.
you know, feel that you're independent and all that kind of stuff. And what do you feel is the most important lesson that you've learned in your life?
Yeah. I feel like everybody's probably got so many experiences and people, that have like touched their lives and things that have like led them to where they're at right now. I think the most important lesson that I've learned is that people will remember how you made them feel.
Mm,
And I think that's like the tail end of a Maya Angelou quote. But I think it's very true after I'd heard it for the first time, and I think of it really often. So I ask myself a lot, whether it's like at work or in my marriage or with friends or whatever it is, how am I making this person feel, or how did I make this person feel? I ask myself that a lot, and I do think sometimes showing up for one person can look a little bit different than showing up for someone else too.
mm-hmm.
Like conversationally, I do this a lot in my job too, but conversationally, for example, like one person might need my input in like a harsher way, and then someone else might need it in a much more like sugar coated
Oh,
way.
for sure.
And then another person might not need me to say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just how you made them feel, which I hope is, heard and cared for and valued and supported, no matter if that's at work or not. That's kind of my goal there. But I often think in terms of like a lesson that I've learned, like how am I making these people or this person feel valued or heard, and how can I, take that and move it forward in the moments when I like haven't done that well, what could I have done differently, and what can I do differently for this person in the future. So I would say that, not to try to take credit from Maya Angelou, but I think yeah, I think that's a really good way to operate.
So kind of shifting from, being since we're in the music scene and all that kind of stuff, dealing with the big stage all the time, from like community events to like, big artists and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Scenario, you're on the stage. It's like it's a sold out
Okay.
show, 8,000 people. You have to send a message to a certain group of people. First question is, who would those people be? So
Hmm.
all those 8,000 people are a certain type of people. And what are you gonna say to those people?
Okay. So I think I'm going to take this on a little bit more of a personal route, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, okay. So I think, and this is a very niche thing. So I I think personally that I would send a message to anyone that's in the crowd, which statistically it would be quite a few, who have experienced loss, or like specifically like a pregnancy loss or like a
Hmm.
baby loss and stuff. And I think I would take my time on the stage, hopefully not getting, rushed off or booted off. Um, I think I would encourage those people, whether it's like a person themselves who's experienced it or like their partner who went through that with them or walked through that with them. I think I would encourage them to like talk about it more, with their friends or other people who have gone through that, or like a therapist or counselor, whatever. Because there's this strange like don't talk about it
Hmm.
kind of thing, and attitude that surrounds that experience, that it's like one in four, people experience, one in four women experience, um, that that loss, that
Hmm.
crazy hard time. And I know from a personal level or whatever, I didn't encounter a lot of people who had ever mentioned that, or when I did talk to them about it, they would be like, "Oh, yeah, that happened to me last year." And I'm like, "I knew you last year. Like, why didn't you tell me? Like, I could
Hmm.
have I could have helped you. I could have done something." So I think that, we don't talk about it, kind of taboo attitude about it, like, shouldn't really exist.
Hmm.
And I think talking helps. So I think maybe that's what I would maybe that's what I would shout, is talking helps. Like, if you're
Hmm.
experiencing loss, even if it's not that type of loss, or some sort of grief of a relationship or a marriage or a person or whatever, talking helps. Talk to someone, get help when you need it. I think that's what I would that's what I would try to shout from the stage.
So, gonna hit up these last two questions before I open the floor up to you. Um, think back to a time that you truly felt transformed. How did you change and why?
Yeah. I kind of mentioned this earlier a little bit, but around the time that I turned 26, um, I I think that was a pretty profound, like, little time of my life for
Hmm.
me. So it wasn't like a really crazy transformative, like, moment or
Mhm.
whatever. I think it was a little bit of kind of a culmination of moments around that time. And I think I started to settle into like acceptance of who I am as a person. I started to take like my physical and mental health more seriously. I found a great church, like after years of not being committed to one, like Drew and I ended up finding a home church, experienced loss for the first time as an adult. Um, found my footing at work and I
Mhm.
gained some self confidence, all this stuff. But I think that frontal lobe development
Mm,
type
mm.
era was big for me, as it is for everyone. But that was the most crazy transformative thing. And I wish, kind of calling back to that question you asked at the beginning, if you could go back and kind of like encourage yourself or things that you've learned or whatever when you were younger. I wish I could encourage myself to start taking on some of these things and building that confidence earlier, in my life, rather than waiting until medically my brain is like, oh, we should care about getting movement in every day. We should care about this. But yeah, I think just getting older has been very transformative for me personally.
We love that. So
Mm-hmm.
this question I just started incorporating. I think it was one of the last episodes that I did. If you wrote a story about your life or the pain that you went through, what would the last sentence be?
I think I think my last sentence, whether about pain or just life in general, I think my last sentence would be the same. Either way. And I think it would be all that ever mattered was love. And I think that's how I would end it. I think we'd close the book right there.
Mm, just end the podcast right there. Goodbye. So opening up the floor now to you to, pose any questions to either me or the listeners of the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a question for you, Devon. What is, what's something that you have, I guess, learned, experienced, um, felt to be something positive since you've taken the job at the same place as me?
Um,
I would love to know because I don't feel like we've talked about work a lot. Whenever we're even at work, I feel like I'm always
mhm.
like, "How are you?" I'm like, "How's it going?"
I feel like the biggest positive thing that I've experienced when I was at work was probably the first time I worked in the box office on a non-show day. So like I just transitioned from working at Publix to working at the Orion and all that kind of stuff. More
Mm-hmm.
still in that special part-time role, but more of like actual part-time type of thing. Um, was the first day there, and I don't know what it was. Like the phones were ringing. I was answering calls, and then
Mm-hmm.
if I missed a call, I would go back, call the guy that I missed. And the the guy that I had helped, I probably had me and him probably either called back to each other like 4 or 5 times. And each time we stayed on the phone for like a good 5 to 10 minutes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up leaving a Google review, like I think it was like the day after. I was like, oh yeah, that guy Devon. Of course, you spelled my name wrong, but we get past that. But he was like, oh yeah, he was such like a good person to work with. He listened to me. He made me feel like um he was understanding and not listening just to report something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I felt like that was probably one of my proudest moments at work was just
Yeah.
being able to like help people because my biggest thing is like I feel like just like you, just being able to put a smile on people's faces makes my day.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing that, hey, I put a smile on that person's face. Now I can now I can go about my business properly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty much my biggest thing. It's just being able to make people smile and make people realize that there's better things in life. And I think pretty much tying this back in, um, when I went to Hawaii, when I went back to Hawaii the first time, which was like 7 months after I got here, um, for those of y'all who don't know and who haven't listened to the first episode of the podcast, I am in a wheelchair. And I have to get help onto the plane and all kind of stuff. I don't mind that. I don't care. I have no shame in that. Um, but the guy that I was sitting next to, I sat next to him, and I'm always like, "Oh, what's going on, bro? How are you?" And just to make like conversation. And then he had asked me the same question back, and I was like, "Oh, I can't complain." And that's my tip. Everybody who knows me, that's my answer for every single time
Mhm.
that somebody asks me how I'm doing. But I can't complain. Can't complain. And then it's funny because a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, you can always complain." I was like, "No, I can't. I literally can't complain about anything right now." Um, and he was like, so we sat on the plane in silence, or I typically have headphones on like all the time. It's like I'm just listening to
Mhm.
music. And he looked at me after, as soon as we landed, and he was like, you said you can't complain. He was like, I've had like 50 things to complain about from the time I woke up this morning to like um to the point we landed right now. And he was like, you saying you can't complain and you're in a wheelchair and all that kind of stuff. He's like, now I cannot. He's like, now I cannot complain because looking at you is like, so I feel like that's wrapping that all back in, just having that positive mentality in anything that
Mhm.
I do, and just kind of like being positive at work makes work positive for me. I guess
Yeah.
you can say, yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. And I love that Google review, the guy was like, Devon made me feel
Hmm.
heard or whatever. Like I
Hmm.
mattered, all that. Like I think yeah, I think once you start operating, thinking that way
Hmm.
too, you're a little more conscious of what people need from you. And, it's effective. People are like not effective in like a productive
Hmm.
productivity way, but effective in like oh wow, like you made a difference even for just 10 minutes or
Hmm.
even for just 10 seconds to that person. And I mean that's what life is like a culmination of those 10 seconds and those 10 minutes with different people over and over and over. So I love that though. I love that you were able to have that experience,
I
with
try
those
my
people.
best.
Yeah,
I try my
we do a
best.
good job.
So coming up on the last 2 minutes of the podcast, that closing question, everybody who listens knows, what's one piece of advice you can share with the listeners of the podcast?
Yeah, I was excited. I'm excited for this one. So I'm stealing a page from one of my favorite people to ever walk this earth's book, and it's my dad. So growing up, to me and my brother, and still to this day, he
Mm-hmm.
still says this. He has always said, "Hey, you have a choice every single day to either be the lion or the gazelle." And to be the lion means to wake up and go do what we need to do to push through, conquer the day, and to finish strong. And then to be the gazelle is to wake up, let the stress of the day and overwhelm, that comes kind of take you over and drag you down. And I think my advice would be, to challenge yourself each morning or each day or when you're struggling with something, like periodically to challenge yourself with that question. Like, am I going to be the lion or am I going to be the gazelle in this day or this situation or this meeting or whatever it is that's
Mm-hmm.
happening? But yeah, my dad is full of full of fun stuff like that. But yeah, that would be my piece of advice from my dad's book.
The lion or the gazelle?
The lion or the gazelle?
I came so close to naming the podcast something that had to do with lions and all that kind of stuff. And
Really?
I was like, nah, we're gonna stick with David and the bear
Hey,
because it makes sense.
we
Yeah,
love a lion, but we also love a bear. We love all of them. I think
makes
you're
sense.
right. We're
So
tackling the day.
so without, I guess that just about wraps up our the segment of the podcast. I appreciate y'all for listening. I appreciate you, Haley, for hopping on the podcast. And
Yes, I appreciate you, Devon.
oh, for sure, for sure. I'll be in the office. I'll be in the office. Um, but yeah, anyway, thank y'all for listening. If y'all see Haley around the Huntsville area, be sure to say hi. Like she says, she's very extroverted. She loves
Yeah,
people. So
you will not overwhelm me by
yeah.
talking to me ever.
Um, she does a lot of shopping at Costco for the office anyway. So you know,
I do.
so
Costco and thrift stores.
yeah.
I'm out and about all the time.
So y'all are gonna see her. Anyway, yeah, thank you, Haley, for hopping on. We do appreciate it here at here on the podcast. And if y'all are sitting next to somebody listening to the podcast, be sure to tell them that you love them. And we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for listening to the David and the Bear podcast.